Wanted to start by telling you of a guy who's kind of a hero of mine. He actually passed away a while ago. His name was Paul Lapp. Paul was like a real-life Indiana Jones in Raiders of the Lost Ark. He was a pastor, action hero pastor, which I, feel like I am too. And like me, he was passionate about archaeology. But unlike me, he was wicked smart, just brilliant pastor. In fact, he went to Harvard and got a doctorate and started teaching Old Testament archaeology during the week at the Pittsburgh Theological Seminary. Preached at his church on the weekends, taught archaeology on the weeks. And it was in one of his archaeology classes that a friend, a fellow archaeologist, came to him between classes and said, I got to show you something. Open this box, and there's an ancient fragment of a document, a little scroll piece. And this sounds like it's right out of Indiana Jones, isn't it? Well, this friend said, I can't go to Israel, but I've been told that this came out of an unexplored cave recently discovered by a Bedouin shepherd. If you'll go, he will guide you, and you can be the first to go through this cave, which is rich with archaeological treasure. Paul Lapp went home, gathered his wife and his 5 little kids and said, Daddy's going on a trip, bye. Kissed them all, packed his bags, flew to Israel, found the Bedouin shepherd, packed backpacks, marched into the wilderness, and the shepherd guided him to this ancient cave that had never been explored. I read his description of when he first walked into that cave. Can you imagine the cobwebs he had to push away? The mud turned out not to be mud, but bat guano. Cool, huh? And then deeper in the cave, he found the bats, thousands of them swarming around his head. He said he had to beat them away from his hair. I mean, what an adventure. Would you like to have been there? He started crawling because at one point the cave got so low down he had to crawl. And as he crawled through, he came across a human skull. Some of you would have been turning around and taking off. And he moved into this room where there's another human skull and then another. And as his lantern illuminated this inner chamber, he found 300 entire skeletons in that room. It was only later when they put together pieces of the puzzle that they could explain what had happened in this terrible tragedy. And it became evident that everything in this room dated back to, get this, 335 BC. Some of you were thinking like Dead Sea Scroll cave era. This is 3 centuries before the Dead Sea Scrolls stuff went into their caves, all right? 335 BC is when Alexander the Great, with his Greek army, marched through Israel, destroying everything in their path. And so the scholars have put it together. What happened was this group of 300 Israelites were fleeing from the Greek army led by Alexander the Great. They ran into this cave seeking cover, and rather than the Greek soldiers going in after them, they lit a fire at the mouth of the cave, which ate up all the oxygen, and all 300 suffocated to death deep in that cave. Horribly tragic. Well, Paul Lapp conducted a formal excavation of the remains in this cave. And amongst all the skeletons, they found treasure. They found ancient coins, jars of ancient coins. They found jewelry, gold and silver jewelry. But the most important archaeological discovery that they came across was what they call the 7-sealed scroll. I have a replica of the scroll that they found amongst the skeletons in this cave. Mind you, this is 2,300 years old. And you say, how would a parchment, which is animal skin, scroll last that long? The arid climate, which just is devoid of bacteria that would disintegrate stuff like this, is the only environment where something would last that long, but it did. And there's the parchment scroll with 7 seals. And a seal, let me explain, is where they roll it up and they seal it by wrapping little leather bands around the parchment, and then they press a clay button onto the leather to lock the leather band and seal it in place. And when I say they press, I should clarify that people of authority in the ancient world, people of significance, they would have a signet ring. It would be a ring, and on the face of the ring would be a carved stamp with their mark, their signature, if you will. And in the case of this document, all 7 of the seals had different marks, different rings had pressed into that. And what they discovered is the reason there were 7 seals is that there were 7 witnesses of the business contract contained on the parchment. In fact, every time now they find a document with multiple seals, they know that was a legal business contract, because only in a business contract would you need multiple witnesses to validate the contract. Isn't that interesting? And Paul Lapp, with great enthusiasm, eventually cut all 7 of the seals, opened up the document, and found, sure enough, it was a legal document describing and affecting the sale of personal property. You say, why is this important to our study of Ruth? Well, we're about to step into the courtroom. There's some legal documents that are going to be signed, some business that's going to take place. And this will become very helpful for us understanding what's happening in the case of Boaz and Ruth.